Okay, so losing fluency in your L1, and I'm talking specifically as an adult moving to a foreign country. Um, I was living abroad for 3 years when I first started to notice I would make mistakes with subject verb agreement. I would take like two different idioms that had like the same meaning and sort of like merge them together. Um, And I started to get confused with stuff where people would ask me, like, oh, do you say like I'm going by foot or on foot? And I'm like, I don't know the answer. um, and then I realized that it's like it didn't even cross my mind that like I would say I walk or I take the train or I bike because I was so used to hearing people saying stuff like by train, by car, on foot. And yes, somebody explained to me like the system of how you know which preposition to use because it's not something that I ever thought about. But you get used to hearing non-native speakers and the way they speak. And yeah, that's probably something that's like common in the UK, but there's also a lot of things that people will say like, "Oh, can you pick me at the library?" and stuff like that, where it's like they're leaving out the other half, and it just becomes common because everybody's speaking that way and you get used to hearing it, and then it doesn't sound so wrong anymore. And I also remember somebody I met at the time who had been abroad for 10 years who was saying, like, make sex or something like that, where I was like, okay, that's definitely, like, not something you would ever expect to hear from a native speaker. So stuff like that definitely happens over time. And I've seen a couple people where I was like really obvious after like 10 or 20 years. Um, I think probably in the earlier years, like what I noticed after 3 years, nobody else around me was picking up on that stuff. So I think it's just like starting off more subtle. And then it kind of becomes more obvious when you're really fully immersed in another language to the point where that language becomes more dominant in your life. Um, I think I do a decent job of keeping up to date with like new slang because of social media. But for me, it's really weird when I'm like in the States and I hear people saying this stuff and I'm like, oh, y'all say that out loud too? Like, mm. Also, I remember in the early days when I was like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go learn these languages to a C2 and be an interpreter. Somebody was like, yeah, watch out because a lot of people go down that path where they're so focused on their L2s that they don't realize that they're losing their L1 at the same time. So then they're ready to start interpreting school and they're taking their entrance exams and they could pass with flying colors in their like B and C languages, but they fail in their A language. I think the point they were making was like, don't even try to be an interpreter if you didn't grow up like multilingual, but um yeah, like at this point I feel pretty secure that like I'm never gonna like completely lose my English, but like yeah, it definitely does get weaker and it becomes more of an effort to keep up with things. And when I consider like what it would take to like reach a truly native level in German, I feel like the cost of that would be like losing more native level fluency in English. And the thing is, like, the whole time I've been abroad, I've always been like doing the majority of my online interactions and chatting and calls and voice messages and everything in English. So, like, I've always had like a very strong English presence in my life, and yet I still feel it slipping away. So, like, I really feel that like even for it being my first language, it's like I need to really spend time immersed to where I'm actually using it to make sure that I don't lose it too. So yeah, I really think like if you're going to be living abroad long term, it's like either you are in sort of like an expat or immigrant bubble where you are still using your first language like the majority of the time in person, or you end up losing it to some degree, which just kind of comes with the territory.